Welcome back, everyone. This is DerekJ Speaks, and we are once again here to cover WrestleMania 38. This time talking about Night 2, taking place on Sunday night, April 3rd. Once again live from AT&T Stadium. Not quite as good as Night 1. I think many people figured that would be the case going in. I know I did. Because I looked at both nights, I looked at the card, I looked at the lineup, and I figured Night 1 seems like it's going to be really good. Night 2 doesn't look that strong. And then after Night 1 came and went, had some of the best WrestleMania matches in quite a few years. Overall, very enjoyable show, very fun. That was the key. And I even said at the end of my review of WrestleMania Night 1, by the way, if you did not listen to that one, feel free to listen to that before you finish this one. But I said that Night 2 was going to have a hell of a time following what we saw on Night 1 with an incredible Raw Women's Championship match, an awesome segment, an awesome return for Cody Rhodes in an excellent match against Seth Rollins, that incredibly fun main event with Stone Cold Steve Austin and Kevin Owens. It was going to be a tough act to follow. And Night 2 did not really follow it. There was nothing that really lived up to how special and unique Night 1 was, but that is not to say Night 2 wasn't fun. There were quite a few very enjoyable moments from Night 2. In fact, it's funny because the most fun element of Night 1 was Steve Austin, and the most fun element of Night 2 was also Stone Cold Steve Austin. If you would have told me that in the year 2022, we would have 2 nights of WrestleMania, and between those 2 nights, we would have a match involving Stone Cold Steve Austin on one night and a match involving Vince McMahon on the other night, I don't even think I could comprehend that thought. But in this year 2022 at WrestleMania 38, that's exactly what we got. We saw Vince McMahon actually wrestle on this night. We saw Vince McMahon actually win his match on this night. And when you have Steve Austin in Texas for WrestleMania and you have 2 nights, it's pretty smart to put him on both nights. So he got the big win in the main event of WrestleMania Night 1, and he came back out for a huge pop and a really fun segment on Night 2 with Vince McMahon and Austin Theory. And oh boy, poor Vince just cannot sell a Stone Cold Stunner to save his life. But that was not the only fun thing about WrestleMania Night 2. The very polarizing anything goes match between Johnny Knoxville and Sami Zayn. It was getting really over with the crowd. The crowd was popping for all of the insanity in this match, all the crazy weapons, all the stunts, all the jackass members who were making appearances. It was crazy. In fact, I would say, coming out of this night, some of the most popular people who got the biggest ovations of the entire night, you could argue, were names like Stone Cold Steve Austin, Johnny Knoxville, Wee Man, and Pat McAfee. What does that say about your current roster? Not very much, but that is the situation that we found ourselves in. Those 4 names, or a few others, but those 4 names in particular were 4 of the most over acts on the entire show. So, that is the state of WrestleMania Night 2 here. I would say Edge and AJ Styles started off a little bit slow, but it turned into a very good match with a finish and an outcome and a post-match thing that happened. Sets up something that I'm very intrigued by. It was reported, I believe 2 days ago, that there was a plan in place. It was initially reported by Fightful, I want to say, that there was a plan in place for Edge to eventually lead some kind of heel stable. and that Damian Priest was a name that was being considered for said stable. Not sure about the other names, but at least Damian Priest will be the first one introduced. And on this show, we saw that. Towards the conclusion of the Edge AJ Styles match, we got an appearance from Damian Priest after the match was over, after Edge was victorious, which I predicted he would be. Damian Priest was right there. The two of them stood side by side, left together, and are seemingly now forming some type of twisted alliance with one another. And in the main event, Roman Reigns conquered Brock Lesnar to become the undisputed champion in WWE. Still the Universal Champion and the new WWE Champion, now combining both championships. Roman Reigns is the man of WWE. In a main event, that was a really fun sprint. They redeemed themselves from the last time they main evented a WrestleMania, from WrestleMania 34 back in New Orleans in 2018. This was a far better match than that one. Not quite as good as their very first match at WrestleMania 31. I still call that one of the best WrestleMania main events we've had in several years. This one was right below that one, but the finish of this match just felt so flat. Whereas the finish of the awful WrestleMania 34 match, that was a complete shocker, threw everyone off guard. But this one here, it was expected. It wasn't necessarily the outcome. I don't think too many people doubted that Roman Reigns were going to win, whether they wanted him to or not. I just think the way the finish went down and how matter-of-fact and abrupt it was really threw me off and took me off guard. But I still enjoyed the main event itself. And I talked about it, but yes, the Pat McAfee Austin Theory match that transitioned into a Pat McAfee Vince McMahon match that then transitioned into Stone Cold Steve Austin coming out. That entire segment was so much fun. Not all of it, but we'll get into that. So overall, I would have to say Night 2 was fun, just not quite as fun as Night 1. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get into this entire show from start to finish. Let's start things off with the pre-show. Once again, second night in a row, they had a 2-hour pre-show. No matches, just people talking. The panelists, once again, were outside. They cut to other people in the crowd talking. A lot of promos, a lot of predictions and all that. The best thing about it is Booker T on the panel. He is wildly entertaining. He says some very wild, out-of-pocket stuff, and it is very entertaining to me. Other than that, I can do without these 2-hour kickoff shows that don't have matches. I know it's always been a hot topic of whether or not there should be matches on the pre-show, and if people are relegated to the pre-show, what does that mean for their position and all that? It's nice to have something, though. And looking at certain things that happened on this show, there was at least one match that probably would have had a better off time taking place on the pre-show, where it could have had a little bit more time. But whatever. On to the actual show. The show opened up, of course, America the Beautiful, all that, but the actual show kicked off with Triple H. Triple H making his entrance. He had his wrestling boots with him, and he had a water bottle. He made his way down to the ring. The game theme music playing. The crowd is going nuts for this man. He gets up on the apron. He's building it up, and he does the whole thing, the whole water spit angle, the whole gimmick that he does. Crowd was losing their minds for it. Triple H is in the ring, posing for the crowd. You can see he's getting very teary-eyed, very red-eyed. He gets on the mic, tells everyone thank you. Of course, he's met with thank you Triple H chants, or thank you Hunter. And he says thank you, and he tells everyone welcome to WrestleMania, and he leaves his boots in the middle of the ring, of course, signifying the end of his long, incredible career. Triple H officially announced his retirement last week, and he got to come out here on Night 2 of WrestleMania. Triple H has had quite the weekend. He appeared at the Hall of Fame. That was his first big public appearance in front of a live crowd, and there was video of him coming out on stage with the other wrestlers, and he got a very big ovation. Of course, The Undertaker shouted him out during his Hall of Fame speech. We saw Triple H appear at the NXT show, having a really emotional farewell with Tommaso Ciampa, and now Triple H got to open up WrestleMania, got the big entrance, got the big ovation from the crowd. It was really cool. It was a very nice start to WrestleMania. And that transitioned into the first match of WrestleMania Night 1, which was the triple threat match for the Raw Tag Team titles. RK Bro, Randy Orton, and Riddle defending against Montez Ford and Angelo Dawkins, the Street Profits, and of course, Otis and Chad Gable, the Alpha Academy. Now, in between Triple H having his moment in the beginning and the entrances for this match, they quickly made mention of the fact that Gable Steveson was once again here at WrestleMania. He was introduced by Stephanie McMahon the previous night, and here he was again, this time in the front row. But that would not play a factor until after the match. As for the match itself, very fun match. It was a nice opener, very fast-paced. Of course, you got all these guys in the ring at the same time doing crazy stuff, and you expect things to get wild, and it was. I thought some of the finishing sequences were really fun. Riddle and Randy Orton, they have just clicked and connected as a team. Some of their tandem offense that they perform gets super over with the crowd. At one point, they both hit double draping DDTs on both members of the Street Profits. And for the finish, we had Montez Ford, had Randy Orton laid out in the ring. He was going up top, seemingly about to set up for his frog splash. But when he was up there, Riddle popped up on the apron. He springboarded up and hit an RKO off the top turnbuckle, crashing down onto the ground. Chad Gable on the other side up top, he comes flying down and gets hit with an RKO in midair. Randy scores the fall, and RK Bro are still your reigning Raw Tag Team Champions. After the match, the Street Profits came in. They wanted to celebrate with RK Bro. They had their red Solo cups. They were pouring drinks in. I was sniffing out a heel turn here. Things were just not really sitting well with me. But then they looked over to the crowd and they were waving and motioning for Gable Steveson to get in the ring. So Gable obliged. He hopped the barricade, got in the ring. He got a cup of his own. They were all about to do the cheers, and then Party Pooper Chad Gable came in and knocked the cup right out of Gable Stevenson's hand. Chad Gable got a mic. Gable Steveson snatched the mic away from him, but then Chad Gable got it back. And then we engaged in Gable versus Gable violence here. Chad was telling him, "You're new here and you need to shoosh." Of course, doing his little shoosh gimmick. And then Gable Steveson grabbed him and got him in position and hit him with a belly-to-belly suplex. Just launched him clear way over his head across the ring. Really cool moment. Got a big pop from the crowd. And then on the outside, he rejoined the babyfaces where they all cheered together. They all had their red Solo cups, and that was it. So really fun opening match, and I thought the post-match angle with Gable Steveson and Chad Gable was really good. It got over big with the crowd. Gable Steveson, he looks good. I mean, he hit one move here, but he took his shirt off, and he looks ripped. He looks great, and we'll see if all the tools come together for him as an actual performer. I'm not sure how soon we will see him in the ring, but when we do, it will be on Monday Night Raw. So at some point this year, I have to imagine it will be, and it might be very soon. I'm sure they probably just wanted him for the WrestleMania show, but I would have to think he'll be appearing very soon. But yeah, good stuff here. Up next, we had Omos versus Bobby Lashley. In the words of Big E, big meaty men slapping meat. A hoss fight here. Not overly entertaining, but it served its purpose, and even this match was getting over with the crowd. They were really behind Bobby Lashley. They were really into him and wanting to see him tear down this tree known as Omos. Of course, Omos was having his way with Lashley pretty much throughout the entire match, just dominating him. Lashley had a few hope spots here and there, but he really could not figure out Omos, and Omos was just having his way with Bobby Lashley until Omos rammed. Actually, no, this was a point in the match, a pretty scary spot. Omos rammed Lashley into the corner, and he did so where Lashley hit the corner, but the back of his head kind of whiplashed and hit the top of the ring post. So that was a very scary moment there. But we see Lashley, he starts to get a second win. He starts to come back. He's trying to hit a suplex on Omos, but Omos is not going. He's not going. I think even Omos tried to hit a suplex on Lashley, but Lashley was able to counter it. And then he did eventually hit the vertical delayed suplex on Omos. Not the prettiest thing you'll see. It's nothing along the lines of Andre Hogan at WrestleMania 3, but it was still very impressive to see him get him over like that. Lashley that is, hit Omos with a spear to the back, his kidneys, and then he geared back up, hit him with a second spear, and got the win. So Bobby Lashley is the first man to finally defeat the undefeated Omos. I have no idea where they go from here, but Bobby Lashley is clearly along the babyface alignment, and seeing how the main event ended, Bobby Lashley should be the very first man in line to go up against Roman Reigns, because Bobby Lashley, or I should say Roman Reigns, is holding now a championship that Bobby Lashley technically never lost. So I don't know who's going to be the first person to confront Roman Reigns during his first appearance, but the first challenger for Roman Reigns should be Bobby Lashley, because you have that built-in story right there. So up next, one of the more entertaining matches, one of my guilty pleasures coming out of WrestleMania weekend, that being the Anything Goes match between Johnny Knoxville and Sami Zayn. God bless Sami Zayn. This man is a freaking national treasure. He performs his heart out, and he plays his role to damn near perfection. He is one of the pillars, one of the just most important, pivotal characters on SmackDown. Very underrated, but I wouldn't really say underappreciated. I think he's greatly appreciated, because you stick him in any position, any role on the show that you need him to be in, and he plays it up to perfection. And this match was proof of that. All the craziness, all the wackiness and silliness that took place in this match would not have nearly gone over as well as it did if it were not for Sami Zayn reacting to it, being the butt of the joke, and being on the receiving end of a lot of the punishment that was happening in this match. Johnny Knoxville, of course, he played his part too. He took some crazy abuse in this match, but this was the Sami Zayn show through and through, and seeing his reactions and seeing a lot of the pain and embarrassment that he was going through here in this match was very entertaining, and he played it up very well. I don't even know how to go through every single thing that happened in this match. Of course, you had a bunch of weapons. I believe Sami Zayn right out the gate just booted Johnny Knoxville in the face. And can I just say this? Apparently, according to Michael Cole on commentary, every single time Sami Zayn delivered a kick to anyone's face in this match, even if it was just standing up, not in the corner, just standing up, anytime he did that, apparently that's a haluva kick. So Sami Zayn, anytime he boots anyone in the face, is automatically a haluva kick. I thought all these years that the haluva kick is when you have the other opponent laid up in the corner and Sami Zayn from the other end comes charging in and boots them right in the face right there. That is a haluva kick. But apparently anytime he delivers a kick, it's a haluva kick. So thank you, Michael Cole, for teaching us that. So Sami Zayn, I guess, delivered a haluva kick. That was the first thing that happened in this match. But we saw Sami Zayn use a bunch of weapons on Johnny Knoxville. Johnny Knoxville used a few weapons of his own. He had a fire extinguisher that he blasted in Sami's face. And there was a few other crazy things that he had up his sleeve in this match too. There was a table introduced. There were a few tables, but there was just a regular standard table propped up in the corner where Sami Zayn delivered an exploder on Johnny Knoxville, crashed him right into the table. At this point, we see some of the Jackass crew. There were members of the Jackass crew who were at ringside, who were right there in the front row. Sami Zayn was taunting them a little bit earlier. At one point, when Sami was going for the haluva kick in the corner, a proper one, Johnny Knoxville whipped out an air horn and kind of stopped him in his tracks. But then Sami kicked him, booted him anyway. So while Knoxville's down, Sami Zayn, he's looking for something else to use on him, when out of nowhere comes Chris Pontius. Of course, he's another member of Jackass. He comes in, he's taunting Sami Zayn, then he strips down to a very, very skimpy thong. He starts dancing and gyrating and stuff towards Sami Zayn. Sami Zayn drops him, lays him out, and then basically tosses him to the side. So we don't have to worry about him anymore. But then Sami Zayn goes to the outside. He looks under the ring, and then he is then attacked by Wee Man. And I mentioned earlier, Wee Man was one of the more over stars on this entire show. The crowd popped huge when Wee Man came from under the ring and just started lacing into Sami Zayn, just delivering a bunch of these little quick, fury-filled punches, got him in the ring. Wee Man hit a body slam on Sami Zayn. Sami Zayn took and sold a body slam from Wee Man, of all people. So Sami's down. At one point, Johnny was able to hit a tornado DDT, but it was only good for a 2 count. Eventually, Sami did boot Wee Man in the face, knocked him down. Sami went up top, but as he was up there, apparently Johnny Knoxville had some pyro set off to basically startle him and knocked him down off the top. He was laid up in the corner, legs extended out, and Johnny Knoxville whipped out a bowling ball and just rolled the bowling ball right into Sami Zayn's balls. So that just looked like it sucked, but it was very funny. It was very entertaining, and of course Sami's reaction to it was very humorous. We see Johnny pull out a taser. We've seen a taser come into play a few times in this feud now. He grabs the taser, he pulls it out, he's kind of taunting Sami Zayn with it all throughout the ring, outside the ring, over towards the announcers area, the timekeepers area. And as Sami Zayn is kind of backing up over there, he is slapped in the face with this giant swinging hand. I don't know if you remember those commercials for the Jackass movies, but that's a patented prop from those Jackass films. And so just slapped Sami Zayn right in the face. Very, very funny. I'm sorry. Like, that's every time I saw it in those trailers and commercials for the movies, it cracked me up, and it cracked me up here. So this was very fun. We see Sami. He gets back in the ring. He's able to go up top, but Johnny Knoxville, using a pair of tongs, grabs Sami Zayn by the balls. He was showing no mercy to Sami Zayn's poor nether regions here. So he grabs him by the balls with the tongs and launches Sami Zayn off the top to the outside, crashing down through a table that had mouse traps attached to it. This was a table that Sami Zayn himself pulled out earlier in the match, and Sami was the one to go crashing down through it. Back in the ring, or before they get back in the ring, they threw Sami back in the ring, but then all of the guys from Jackass, they all look under the ring and they pull out this giant mouse trap. This giant, overly oversized mouse trap. They put it in the ring. Johnny Knoxville has Sami Zayn laid down towards it, and he's trying to set it off. It didn't go off immediately. It kind of had a delayed reaction, but it eventually went off, and technically it was pinning down Sami Zayn, which meant his shoulders were down. So Johnny Knoxville goes in for the cover, and he gets the win. Johnny Knoxville pins Sami Zayn. Of course, you had all the bells and whistles of this match, but I thought it was a guilty pleasure of mine. I was having fun watching it. The crowd was super into it. I saw a lot of people on my timeline, and I'm sure other people's timelines. There were many people who I'm sure just despised this match, and they just absolutely hated it. You have a match like this on the show. Meanwhile, your United States champion is losing in 2 different matches on SmackDown. The Intercontinental Champion is losing a bunch of times. Neither of them can make it onto the WrestleMania card. So many names can't make it onto the WrestleMania card, yet you had room for a match like this. Some people might have thought that the match went on a little bit too long and cut into the time for a later match that took place. But what can I say? I actually, honestly, legitimately had fun watching this. It wasn't that bad. It is what it is. And Johnny Knoxville gets the win. So it's another thing for Sami Zayn to complain about and fuel him. And like I said, Sami Zayn, he's a damn national treasure, man. I don't know. I'm very glad he's here in WWE, because they are better off having someone like Sami Zayn than they are without him. So, very fun stuff, at least in my opinion, here in this match. Up next was the Fatal 4-Way for the Women's Tag Team Championships. Carmella and Queen Zelina defending against Sasha Banks and Naomi, Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan, and Shayna Baszler and Natalya. This women's tag team division is completely non-existent. You can see that by the fact that this match was contested by 4 teams, none of which are actual teams. They're not real tag teams. Many of them were just slapped together for the sake of having this match and just getting as many of these women onto the WrestleMania card as you possibly could. But for what it was, I thought it was all right. It was a bit clustered at times, but overall, I thought it was very enjoyable. You had special entrances for Sasha Banks and Naomi. They came out riding in a yellow Lamborghini, or at least Sasha came out riding in it, and she had Naomi hitch a ride. They drove a few feet and just stopped right at the stage and then came back down to the ring. You had Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley come out. Rhea was dressed up as Batwoman and Liv Morgan as Catwoman. So many fans out there, I'm sure, got a kick out of that. The match itself, like I said, bit of a cluster, kind of a car crash, but I thought overall it was fun. It was all right. There was nothing embarrassing or horrible about it. In the end, Sasha and Naomi hit this double team move on Carmella, where Naomi was hitting a glam slam, and at the same time, Sasha was hitting almost like a code breaker. So just completely destroyed Carmella, and Sasha scored the 1-2-3. Sasha Banks and Naomi are the new women's tag team champions, and Sasha Banks is finally in the winning column at WrestleMania after 6 straight losses at WrestleMania up to this point. She scores her very first WrestleMania win here in this match, winning the tag team titles for the third time for her, now with Naomi. So, very emotional moment. You could tell it meant a lot to Sasha Banks getting her very first win. It's a crime that Sasha Banks has been in this company for this long, and this is the first victory that she has had at WrestleMania. That's a crime. Can't even lie. Can't even deny that. But be that as it may, it still made for a very special moment. Seeing Sasha Banks and Naomi together win, it was a very cool moment. I don't foresee them having those tag team titles for very long, but there's not really much you can do with them because there's no tag team division for them to feud with. So I'm sure it's not going to take very much longer for Sasha Banks to re-enter the singles division and go after the women's championship on SmackDown. But for now, a nice little moment for her and Naomi. Up next, one of the matches that I was really excited for, looking forward to the most on this show, Edge versus AJ Styles. Poor AJ, man. AJ made his entrance. He came out to the ring. He was making his way down the aisle, and you could see on the side of his face, dude was busted up. And it looked like, what the hell happened to AJ Styles? Did he get in a fight backstage? Are we going to read a report that he got in a fight with someone that right before he came out for this match? Some people were speculating, oh, maybe his pyro. Did his pyro kind of singe the side of his face and maybe kind of scraped him up and scratched him or something like that? It wasn't until a little bit halfway through the match when I first noticed someone posted onto Twitter. It was a video from the crowd, and they got a good angle of what exactly happened to AJ. So as AJ was making his way out through the curtain, he comes out, and this giant WrestleMania set, there's this giant star that's right above the entranceway. And so AJ apparently just hit the side of his head along that star, and it was enough so that it cut him up on the side of his face. So very unfortunate, but AJ's a trooper. He's a fighter, and it didn't really impact him very much, so very good. Edge came out. He has this whole new gimmick. He has the new Alter Bridge theme, the other side. It sounded badass on the show. He had a really cool entrance. Very Undertaker-esque, especially like Ministry Undertaker. It gave me kind of those vibes. He came out. He had really badass robe on, had the flames coming up. It was really cool. He was on a throne. The throne like rose up from the ashes, basically. It was really cool. So the match itself started off pretty slow. AJ, of course, he was trying to go after Edge. He was trying to kick his ass, and he was succeeding for a while. He had Edge down, and he went over to the apron, went for the 450, and when he came down, Edge got the knees up, and AJ just crashed and burned. So AJ's injured, he's hurt, but at the same time, when Edge got the knees up, apparently he got hurt too. He was selling a knee injury, and both men proceeded to sell their many injuries throughout the rest of this match. Edge was selling the hell out of that leg for all of this match. And that is something that I pointed out on Twitter, that Edge is very clearly very keen on telling stories in his matches and placing a great emphasis on selling. Whereas if a body part is hurt, if you are selling some type of injury, you sell that shit throughout the entire match. And that's what Edge did. And AJ Styles was doing a very good job of that as well. So I thought both men were succeeding along those lines there. A few high spots that took place over the course of this match. We saw Edge lock AJ Styles in the crossface. AJ managed to escape it. He got out. He went for a swing. Edge ducked, hit the Edge-O-Matic. Only good for a 2 count. We see both men on the apron. This was one of the crazier spots of the entire match. Both men are outside the ring on the apron. Edge is up top, and AJ superplexes him off the top turnbuckle onto the ring apron, and both come crashing down and are outside the ring. Big pop from the crowd. I thought it was really cool. The ref starts counting. Both men barely break the count back in. I think they got in right at 9, so they just barely broke it. AJ did end up hitting the 450 splash, this time onto Edge's back, but it was only good for a 2 count. We had AJ gearing up to go for the phenomenal forearm, but when he came out, Edge ducked it. He went for the spear. AJ sidestepped him, rammed him into the ropes, came back. AJ laid him out with the Styles Clash, only good for a 2 count. So we get to the finish, and AJ, he's on the apron. He's about to gear up for another phenomenal forearm. But out of nowhere, the camera pans over, and Damian Priest is just standing right there on the floor. He's looking up. He's not touching AJ. He's not even making an attempt to interfere in the match. But AJ, apparently he's just so dumb that this distracts him. He's looking over. He's confused as to why Damian Priest is there. And then he proceeds to try to go for the forearm. He springboards off the rope, and then he is caught in midair with a spear from Edge. Gets the 1, 2, 3, and Edge picks up his big WrestleMania victory here. After the match, Damian Priest gets in the ring. Edge is in the ring. He's kneeled down. Damian Priest gets in there. He too kneels down, comes face to face with Edge. Both men start laughing. They stand up, stand side by side. They raise their arms in the air. The crowd, mixture of cheers and boos, and both men leave together. So the reports seem to be true. Edge may be forming some type of new brood faction, I guess, and Damian Priest is the first factor in this new faction. He might end up being Edge's kind of like his right-hand man, his enforcer or something like that, and I can get behind that. I can get into this Edge character a little bit more if he's kind of the leader of some type of new brood like faction in the company. I don't know who else would potentially be in it. I look at somebody like T-Bar, Dominic Dijakovic, who is just doing absolutely nothing. I could see him maybe hopefully shedding the stupid name, giving him at least the Dijakovic name back, and maybe he could be in addition to this group. I saw somebody point out on Twitter, what about adding a female to the group? What about someone like Rhea Ripley? I think someone like her would be a nice addition to this little faction here. So I'm sure there's other options, other names on the Raw roster that I'm not even thinking of at this right exact moment. I'm interested to see how this plays out. And this can only benefit Damian Priest. One would expect, one would hope that this can only be of benefit for Damian Priest. He's been doing absolutely nothing of note, nothing of value on Raw for the last few months. There was a while there, he won the US title and he was getting over. He was organically getting over with the crowds. He was going out there having kick-ass matches with people like Sheamus and Jeff Hardy, and T-Bar mentioned him. I think a few other people, and he was getting over. And then out of nowhere, they decided to do this nonsensical, illogical change to his gimmick where he's got this like split personality, and it's like, oh, don't bring out the Damian side of him. And then he became less over. And then they turned him heel after they took the US title off of him. And then he and Finn Balor, it looked like they might have set up a rematch for WrestleMania, but then they just were thrown randomly into the Battle Royal. And Damian Priest, over the course of the last few months, has become less and less over than where he was 6 or 8 months ago. So I think in an attempt to add a new element to Edge's character and maybe help out younger stars, or at least newer names on the roster, it could be a benefit to many people, most of which right now, Damian Priest. So I'm on board. Up next, we got a tag team match that was originally scheduled for night 1, but got cut due to time constraints. So they squeezed it onto the WrestleMania Night 2 show. And if you blinked, you missed it. It was the team of Sheamus and Ridge Holland with Butch in their corner, taking on the New Day, Xavier Woods and Kofi Kingston. I thought it was really cool. They came out in gear that was basically Big E gear. They came out dressed, both of them, as Big E. Had the singlet, had the jacket, had their wrists taped up, had their thighs all oiled up and shined up like Big E's were. And they were basically cosplaying as Big E. And Michael Cole mentioned on Twitter, or I'm sorry, he mentioned on commentary, the fact that they weren't just wearing any old Big E gear. They were wearing the exact gear that Big E won the night he cashed in his Money in the Bank last September and won the WWE Championship. So really cool. Didn't really amount for much in this match. Before the match even started, the babyfaces got beat down by the heels. They had their jackets ripped off of them. Butch took them and he was just throwing them around, tossing them aside. The match finally starts, and immediately Kofi Kingston hits the Trouble in Paradise on Ridge Holland. Meanwhile, Butch is apparently this rabid dog who just wants to fight and just wants to beat people up all the time. Sheamus is trying to hold him back. He's trying to go after Woods. He's trying to go after Kofi. They were trying to play with him a little bit, but it really didn't amount to anything. On the outside, Sheamus hit a bro kick on Kofi Kingston. Back in the ring, he hit a bro kick on Xavier Woods. Ridge Holland got Woods up, hit him with the Northern Grit, I think is the name of his finisher, and got the 1-2-3. I don't even think this went a full 3 minutes. It might have. Maybe it was a little less, maybe a little bit more, but this was really not much of a match at all. They got cut from night 1, and they just barely made it onto night 2. Now, I'm not going to act like this was a match that I was really super excited for, really hyped for, because it really wasn't. It's been a feud that I haven't really cared about. That was even before the Big E injury. I didn't really care about the feud all that much, and the match, it was not anything that I had a whole lot of high hopes for. So I get it just for the sake of getting them onto the WrestleMania card, but in the spirit of giving them just a little bit more time, just so you don't have to shortchange a match. How do you shortchange a match on a 2-night WrestleMania? You're not flooding both nights with 14 or 16 matches. There's no need to shortchange them. If you wanted to give them a fuller match, you were better off just put them on the pre-show. And let them go out there for 5, 8, 10 minutes or something like that. Let them all get a chance to shine and give them a more full match. You had a 2-hour pre-show filled with nothing. You telling me that there was no spot for this tag team match on that pre-show? Alright, whatever. We had another Hall of Fame segment. The Undertaker came back out. This was the 3rd time we've seen The Undertaker this weekend. Once again, got a huge ovation from the crowd. You would think 3rd time the crowd might not be as into him, but they still were. Huge ovation for him. Look, Undertaker, it's a big deal that he wins the Hall of Fame. This is one of the biggest names that has gone into the Hall of Fame in recent years, so you milked that for all it's worth. So, good for him. Then up next, we had Pat McAfee, SmackDown commentator, former punt kicker for the Indianapolis Colts, my favorite football team of all time. Pat McAfee taking on the protege of Vince McMahon, Austin Theory. Mr. McMahon himself came out. He made an entrance. He came down to the ring. He introduced Austin Theory. The two of them took a selfie. We're just getting complete boos from the crowd. And then out came Pat McAfee. Preceding McAfee coming out were the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders. They were out there doing a little routine on the stage. The theme song playing was Seven Nation Army. So out came Pat McAfee. Of course, the crowd singing along. That's a very easy song to sing along to. And in one night, Pat McAfee became one of the biggest babyfaces on the entire roster. He got in the ring. He immediately was going after Austin Theory. He was kicking his ass at several points throughout this entire match, and the fans loved him. They were loving every bit of offense that McAfee was getting on Austin Theory. Anytime Theory took over, he would take down Pat. He would look over at Vince McMahon. McMahon was sitting in a chair over by the commentator's table, and he was just looking over at Vince throughout the entire match, looking for his approval. Anytime Theory was in control, Vince would smile. He was pleased. And then whenever Pat McAfee took over, he got pissed off. Again. McAfee, at one point, he brought Theory to the outside. He was kicking his ass so much, he brought him over to the commentary table, and he put the headset on himself and was calling his own match. He was calling his own spots, talking about he was beating down Austin Theory, kicking his ass, kicking this douchebag's ass, all this crazy stuff. It was hilarious. Haven't seen that since Booker T in TNA, that clip that still makes the rounds every now and then. What was he, Black Snow or something like that? I don't remember. It was hilarious, though. It's one of the most hilarious things Booker T has ever done. Again, I love Booker T. So McAfee has Theory down in the ring. He goes up top. He's about to hit a swanton, but he misses. He crashes and burns. Both men eventually find their way up top. Theory shoves Pat McAfee down, and in doing so, Pat basically did a backflip off the top turnbuckle, landed right on his feet in the middle of the ring, did a huge vertical leap back up to the top, and hit a huge superplex on Austin Theory, and only good for a 2 count. That entire sequence, I remember something very similar in the match that Pat McAfee had with Adam Cole at one of the TakeOver shows a few years ago, and it was just as impressive there as it was here, if not even more so here, because the crowd just completely went nuts for it here. So Theory gets Pat up on his shoulders. He's about to hit his finisher, the A-Town down, but then McAfee managed to slip out of it, rolled up Theory, and got the victory. So Pat McAfee, in his WrestleMania debut match, he scores the pinfall over Vince McMahon's little puppet, his little boy toy, basically. Vince is pissed off. He's berating Austin Theory over at ringside. But then Pat McAfee looks over at Vince and challenges him to come into the ring to face him. Vince teases like he's going to take his jacket off and get in there, but he doesn't go through with it. But then he does. He takes the jacket off, he undoes his tie, takes that off, he's unbuttoning his shirt, and he reveals the classic Vince McMahon black beater, the tank top that he usually wore whenever he would wrestle. He gets in the ring. This 70-something-year-old man, Mr. McMahon, is about to have a match, because you see a referee over here, and the referee goes ahead and rings the bell. Well, first, Austin Theory came back. He hit Pat McAfee from behind, but then he rang the bell. And so began a match between Mr. McMahon and Pat McAfee. A match that was originally reported as to be happening at WrestleMania. So those reports came true. We had the match here. McMahon was beaten down. McAfee, of course, there was the built-in excuse of him getting blindsided. And of course, he had just wrestled a match just a few moments prior. Austin Theory was also being a thorn in the side here of McAfee. He was interfering. Of course, the referee's scared for his life. And Vince ended up getting the win. I think he had a football that Theory gave him that he just punted right into McAfee's face. He pins him and he wins. So Vince McMahon books himself into a WrestleMania match and books himself to win. Because, of course, natural. I laughed when it happened. I thought someone was going to come out and save McAfee or something like that. It never happened. First, Vince had to get his win, and he did. But then after the match, you see Vince and Austin Theory, they're shaking hands, they're posing together, Theory's posing, they hug. Then they started playing Austin Theory's theme music, but Vince kind of reacted to it like he was shocked, but then he was kind of relieved because it was Austin Theory's music. So that was a dead giveaway that someone was coming out. It was just a matter of who. And then we get the glass shatter, and out comes Stone Cold Steve Austin once again in the Austin 316 shirt, in the cutoff jeans, and the knee braces. So I don't know if he even changed his clothes from last night. He came out here, he got right in the ring, went face to face with Vince, then he came face to face with Austin Theory, started throwing punches at him, hit him with the stunner, and then he came face to face with Vince again and decided to share a beer with him. So he gave him a beer. They started to drink beer together. Vince, it was funny. He took a sip of it first to make sure he liked it. And then they did the beer clang. They're drinking. And Austin kicks Vince in the gut. And apparently this was some kick because it just knocked Vince all the way back. He was completely dazed by this because Austin was clearly trying to go right into the stunner. Vince was knocked all the way back. Austin was trying to regain his hold of Vince, but he just really couldn't, and he ended up hitting him with the stunner. It was a terrible stunner, but it was so funny. It's just hilarious that Vince, after all these years, he just still cannot sell a stunner right. It is hilarious. This moment would not have been nearly as fun as it was had Vince McMahon actually sold the stunner well. That would have been cool, but what made this even more fun was the fact that this is vintage Vince McMahon. He gets hit with a stunner from Steve Austin, and he just still cannot sell it right. This may have been the worst. So Vince McMahon in 2022 gave us the new worst Stone Cold Stunner ever. Austin invites Pat McAfee back in. They share beers, and then Austin lays him out with a stunner as well. And Pat McAfee's selling of the stunner was actually very excellent. And it was funny. Austin, he was leaving the ring. It looked like he kind of slipped in the aisleway a little bit, but he regained his composure. They cut over to McAfee, who was laid out on the other side of the ring. And even though he was laid out, he was still drinking that beer. And I thought that was hilarious, which it had to be a thrill for him, lifelong wrestling fan. He gets to compete at WrestleMania. He gets a win. Then he gets to wrestle Vince McMahon. And then he gets to witness Austin and Vince McMahon coming face to face. He gets to eat a Stone Cold Stunner. Very cool moment for him. So, very entertaining stuff here. This was really fun. And then in the main event, the winner-take-all championship unification match, the WWE champion Brock Lesnar going one-on-one with the Universal champion Roman Reigns. Paul Heyman did the introduction for Roman, and Brock did the introduction for himself. And then the bell rang. Brock immediately removed his gloves because he was ready to kick some ass. And that's basically what he did here. He drove Roman into the corner, started to plunge his shoulders into the gut of Roman. He hit him with 3 belly-to-belly suplexes and sent him to the outside. Brock started to target Heyman. Heyman was pleading for his life, saying, I love you. It was all Roman's fault. He made me do it and all this stuff. Just luring him in to a false sense of security. Roman ends up spearing Brock Lesnar through the barricade over in the Timekeeper's area. Brock is down. He just barely makes it back in to break the count. Roman then hits Lesnar with a Superman punch, hits him with another one. Lesnar gets back up. He's laughing. He's laughing in Roman's face. And when Roman goes for a third punch, Lesnar caught him and hit him with a German suplex, and then proceeded to take Roman to Suplex City. I think he hit him with about 5 German suplexes total. He gets Brock gets Roman up on his shoulders, going for the F5, but then Roman slips out, drove Brock into the corner, hit a 3rd Superman punch. Roman goes for the spear, Brock gets him up, hits the F5, only good for a 2 count. Brock gets Roman up again. This time Roman rakes the eyes, and Roman spears Brock Lesnar into the corner, but in doing so, Brock kind of backed the referee into the corner too, so he squished the referee. So with the referee down, Paul Heyman hands a championship belt. I don't remember which belt it was. I believe it was the Universal title belt. He hands it to Roman. Roman uses it, clocks Brock right in the face. Brock's down. I believe before this he hit him with a low blow, but he used the belt, takes down Brock, and it was only good for a 2 count. Then Roman, he's running the ropes back and forth. He spears Brock into the back. Can we just all agree that spears to the back don't look good? It didn't really look good when Lashley did it earlier. It looked even worse here. So let's just not do that anymore. Visually, it does not look good. It looks very weak and awkward. So let's just refrain from doing that from now on. But regardless, it was only good for a 2 count here. We see Roman hit yet another spear, but this time Brock transitioned it into the Kimura lock. And his face is turning purple. He's wrenching on this hole for so long. Roman manages to reach the ropes, and he's over by the ropes. Paul Heyman's on the outside. He's telling Roman, rise, my tribal chief. You have to rise. And Roman is telling him, I think it's out. I believe he was talking about his shoulder. Like, it's out. I think it's out. So then Brock picks Roman up, goes for the F5 again, but then Roman slips out of it and hits a spear and gets the 1, 2, 3. Roman Reigns is your new undisputed champion. Just like that. Just very absolute, matter of fact, nothing special about it. They give Roman both belts. He leaves the ring. He's in the aisleway, standing there with Paul Heyman, raises both belts up. The pyro goes off. The little logo in the corner goes off, and it's there, and then they take it off screen, making you think something else is going to happen. They keep cutting back to the ring, showing Brock's face, and it's all the ingredients of there is something else going to happen here. This is not it. And then it just is. And then they just go off the air. So a very flat, anticlimactic finish to what they were calling the biggest WrestleMania match of all time. It was not that. It was the biggest match that they could have done for this show, but it was not the biggest WrestleMania match of all time. As is, it was very good. It didn't last that long, but it was a nice sprint. It was very hard hitting between both men. Like I said, they redeemed themselves from the last time they main evented WrestleMania. I enjoyed the match itself, but then the finish just really came out of nowhere. You're teasing this injury to Roman, that his shoulder got popped out and that he's down, he's hurt, and there's a weakness to him. I thought, okay, maybe they could play off that a little bit. But then just a few seconds later, he gets another spear and gets the win. And then after the match, where Roman, he's celebrating in the entranceway, he's standing there, they put the little logo in the corner of the screen, that little copyright logo, and usually when they do that, but then they cut away and they're still, lingering on everyone, it makes it seem as though something else is going to happen. But then nothing else happened. So that was just very odd. I know I made the predictions that Roman would win, but then The Rock would come out, he would appear, he would come face to face with Roman Reigns, and that is how you would go off the air for WrestleMania. When Stone Cold Steve Austin came out in the previous segment and did the whole thing with Vince McMahon, I pretty much figured they were not going to have Austin and The Rock appear on the exact same show. So I didn't think that The Rock was going to come out anymore. But the way they set it up at the end of the match there, in the post-match, it made me rethink it. Like, okay, maybe they might do Rock or they might do something There might be more to this than just Roman wins, LOL, but that was it. So, very flat finish to the main event, a very flat finish to the show, but that is not indicative. That has absolutely nothing to do with the actual outcome. I predicted Roman Reigns was going to win. I like Brock Lesnar. I love this run that he's been on. Cowboy Brock has been unbelievably entertaining. I love Brock. But I do love Roman, and I do still dig him and this run that he's been on. I understand the frustration that some people may have with Roman still being the champion and him still going on this long reign. I get it. I understand it. But like it or not, this company has been built completely, entirely around Roman Reigns. Not just SmackDown. SmackDown especially, but even Raw. The entire company is built around this man. These pay-per-view events or these premium live events, whatever you want to call them. All the shows, everything about this company is revolved around this man. They have gone all in. Their chips, everything. They've gone all in on hyping up Roman as the guy in this company, almost to a detriment to the rest of your roster, whereas almost everything else that happens on the show does not feel nearly as important as anything involving Roman Reigns. But that's the position that they did, and it makes sense that they would put all of the championships on him. How long is he going to be an undisputed champion? I have no idea. I don't think that's going to last throughout the rest of the year. I'm pretty sure Roman is going to lose that championship before this year is over, and I believe it is going to be at the hands of either Drew McIntyre or Cody Rhodes. Just depends on who they want to put in that position later on this year. But that does bring up who some future challengers will be. I mentioned earlier, I think one of the first names to come out that should be challenging Roman Reigns should be Bobby Lashley. Lashley never lost that championship. He was taken out of the Elimination Chamber last month, but he was never pinned. He was never submitted to lose that championship. So Lashley can lay claim to being the uncrowned champion, and he should get first crack at Roman Reigns. Eventually, someone like AJ Styles could be back into the championship picture. And I mentioned someone like Cody Rhodes or Drew McIntyre. I believe Drew McIntyre is someone who will ultimately be built up for that spot, probably later on in the year, closer to SummerSlam, and maybe even in that rumored UK Stadium show in September over Labor Day weekend. I could see that being a big spot for Drew McIntyre to finally win the championship and be the man to beat Roman Reigns. But yeah, that's it. There's really nothing else to it. Roman Reigns gonna be switching shows back and forth. There's a very limited window and pool of challengers left for him to face on SmackDown. So now, with him being the single champion of the company and going between Raw and SmackDown, it opens up a few more possibilities and names for him to face on Raw. That's why I mentioned Lashley. That's why I mentioned AJ. That's why I mentioned Cody Rhodes, who appears to be a Raw star. So that is what I see in Roman's future. As for Brock, I don't know. There's still some time on this little deal of his. I don't know what he would do in the immediate future. Maybe you set up a rematch between him and Roman at WrestleMania Backlash. I don't know. I feel like people might be sick of this at that point. I don't know if they can stretch this out to another pay-per-view, but maybe. I think Brock was scheduled to appear at WrestleMania Backlash, but I don't know. But yeah, that about does it here. Overall, Night 2, it was a good show, but it was nothing along the lines of Night 1. There was nothing that happened on Night 2 that could hold a candle to Night 1. The only thing close that could hold a candle to Night 1 was the Stone Cold Steve Austin segment. And as fun and enjoyable as it was already done much better on Night 1. You had that, you had the Raw Women's title match, you had the Cody surprise. Night 1 was great. Night 2 was very good. But I think combined, you account for having one of the better WrestleMania shows that WWE has put on in several years. I remember last year not being too bad. The year before was that empty arena and the PC show, which we really don't count. Going back beyond that, you had a few good WrestleManias with some really good matches on them, but top to bottom, nothing really that captured my imagination overall. This is a show between both nights. When you combine them both, I really enjoyed myself. It made for a very fun weekend, 2-night event for WrestleMania. And they're going to do this again next year. It's going to be 2 nights next year, WrestleMania in Los Angeles. WrestleMania goes Hollywood again, but that's a long ways away. So now WrestleMania is over and done with. Where do things go from here? Where do things lie? What's to be expected going forward? That's the $1 million question. I guess that remains to be seen. We'll see. Tomorrow night, or I guess tonight, depending on when you watch this, will be the post-WrestleMania Raw show. I will be right back here once again to cover that show and the fallout of WrestleMania. No idea what to expect, but one thing I'm hoping for is a Cody Rhodes promo at the top of the show. I don't know what he's going to say. I don't know what he's going to talk about, but I would be very interested in hearing from Cody Rhodes at the very top of the hour on Monday Night Raw. So we'll see how that plays out. We'll see how all of these outcomes and results play out going forward. New feuds, new matches, anything that was just starting at WrestleMania. We'll see how it carries over into these next few shows. And I just hope to be entertained. I hope to enjoy what they do. That would be nice. That would be very nice. But that's it for me. I am tired out. WrestleMania took me out these last 2 nights. They were very fun shows. I have way more positives to say about these nights than I do negatives, which is good. But they were there. But it was just a lot. But that's it for me for right now. Once again, I will be back to cover the post-WrestleMania Raw show, and then I will be retiring for a very long sleep. But until then, thank you guys for listening. I appreciate every single one of you who takes the time to listen to me rattle on about wrestling stuff. It warms my heart, and I thank you immensely. So until the next time, check you later.